Okay, once again, I want to welcome you all to joining our talks today provided by the World Small Animal Veterinary Association and hosted by the International Partnership for Dogs. I'd like to welcome you to Breeding Healthy Quality Dogs, the Veterinarian, Breeder, and Public Roles. Just to get a little bit of housekeeping going for today's talks, we will have some interactive polls that will be included particularly in Jerold Bell's talk. So if you'd like to have your phones ready to participate in that, that would be fantastic. We're asking everyone, as we have quite a large participation group today, to please use the Q&A box options on Zoom for submitting questions. And whilst the talks are underway, we will have our wonderful happy helper squirrels collating those questions together for the Q&A session at the end of the presentations. There will also be a 2-minute survey, or even less than maybe 2-minute survey at the very end of this talk to make sure that we get information from you about how to improve in any future speaking engagements, or to be reassured about what we've done that's worked well for you today. This meeting is a recorded meeting, so if you have to step out for a little bit, or if you run out of time, or if you are joining us a little bit later, it will be available in due course for you to review down the line. It is my great pleasure to invite our key speaker today, Dr. Jerold Bell, who I feel like probably needs no introduction. I imagine many of you joining today will already be aware of him, but for those who haven't had the pleasure, I just wanted to introduce him and mention that he is an adjunct professor of genetics at Cummings School of Veterinary Medicine at Tufts University, and he practices at the Freshwater Veterinary Hospital in Enfield, Connecticut. He earned his DMV from Cornell and was trained in genetics and genetic counseling at Michigan State University and University of Missouri. Dr. Bell currently also chairs the WSAVA Hereditary Disease Committee and is on the board of directors for OFA, the Canine Health Information Center, or known as CHIC, and the American Kennel Club Canine Health and Welfare Advisory Panel. He also is a dog owner and dog breeder of Gordon Setters and has multiple Best in Show dogs, national specialty winners, master hunters, and Westminster breed winners. So he is a great representative of the full spectrum of stakeholders in canine health and well-being, and part of why we're so pleased he's been able to join us today. Before we kick off for Dr. Bell's talk, I am Amy Llewellyn-Zadie. I realize I forgot to introduce myself, and I am the Special Projects Director for the International Partnership for Dogs. My focus is particularly in developing and improving access to genetic testing information and also clinical testing information for dog owners and dog breeders. And we work hard to build relationships across the veterinary, well-being, breeder, and general public sectors for improving dog health. My background is in genomics, plant genomics, and then I changed species because dogs are just so much more fun and exciting than tiny little plants. And I worked for some time at the British Kennel Club developing their evidence-based resources for breeding, and now currently working with the International Partnership for Dogs. To kick off the meeting, I wanted to talk a little bit about what we do as a group and how we support some of the activities that our experts like Dr. Bell are involved in, and our other experts around the world. You will notice a few images throughout this presentation that also represent the human-animal bond, which is why we are all probably here today in some way or another. So the International Partnership for Dogs was launched in 2014 at the first Dog Health Workshop, after the first Dog Health Workshop in 2012, and it was built as a community-focused, for the people, by the people resource to build bridges across the canine health community. We really saw the value in developing a nonprofit, independent resource that is able to help promote and encourage and support all of the good works that are happening in health and research and the development of resources that benefit dog health and well-being. We're made up of a number of different kinds of stakeholders that contribute to what we do as our primary job, which is to collect information. And I'm not quite sure what this particular dog is collecting down in that hole of dirt, but we are willing to go pretty much anywhere to find the best information and resources to share with both the professional level and the layperson level of dog breeding. We share this information through our flagship resource, Dog WellNet, which I encourage you all to have a look at after this presentation. Some of the other work that we do involves a coordination and collaboration across the different industries. We use our network of experts to help encourage and initiate and facilitate collaboration, including people who wouldn't traditionally be seen as maybe working collaboratively or maybe on the surface have different priorities or different roles from each other. We truly believe that the solution to a lot of our shared challenges in dog health and well-being is through collective action and making sure that we all have and are aware of our roles and responsibilities to play to improve dog health. We really promote a balanced big picture approach to canine health and breeding, and we are built on a funding stream that allows us to be independent and transparent about what we do and who we are and how we're involved in canine health and welfare. Our platform, as I mentioned, dogwellnet.com, is where all of our resources are freely accessible. Again, there are a number of resources for the veterinary professional or professional health advisor, as well as the more general dog breeder or members of the public. Some of our key initiatives are our pedigree breeds database. Whilst we are able to provide resources for all dogs, obviously pedigree dogs are a group and a community that have very particular goals for improvement and where there is an abundance of research relative to other dog needs. We also have globally relevant integrated health profiles that give a fuller picture about a breed or breed type's health and access to a number of international databases with regards to health. Another flagship project is the Harmonization of Genetic Testing for Dogs project, which really focuses on providing and improving access to the spectrum of genetic testing that is available, both by breed or type, or information about the diseases, and also help in selecting and choosing the correct genetic test provider to meet your needs and your goals. There are additional resources on genetic advice and genetic counseling and some education resources that are suitable for a spectrum of audiences. We include direct peer review research information as well as clinical information that may be helpful, particularly to vets in practice. Related to this is the Health Strategies database for dogs that promotes a lot of the clinical examinations that are used for either pre-breeding assessments or for an individual dog's health. This includes the classics like hip and elbow scoring information internationally, but other strategies and health programs that are available throughout the globe. And lastly, which may be particularly interesting to the audience here, is our supportive research. We have a number of international project coordination that is underway, including database development for sharing genetic and genomic information, workshops, team projects that we liaise between different international groups on, integrating and introducing dog owners to researchers to help with canine research and special project development, such as international breeding values. We also, as you are joining us today, have a number of different speaking engagements and workshops, and of course, our flagship International Dog Health Workshops. Again, all of this information you can find on dogwellnut.com. We've been running every other year, usually in conjunction or coordinated with the Canine and Feline Genomics conferences across the globe. We try to flip-flop over the Atlantic Ocean, but that doesn't always happen if those darn pandemics get in the way. Our most recent one was held in Helsinki, which you can find an abundance of information that's rolling out from that conference now. So if you want to go and have a look at what initiatives are happening, you can see what some of the outcomes from this meeting, this most recent meeting, and our 6th International Dog Health Workshop we've already started planning for in 2026. And I might be a little bit illegal saying this, but we're pretty sure it's going to be in Italy. We're pretty sure the Italian Kennel Club are going to be our hosts. So look forward to that, probably June 2026. If you are interested after this talk or after having a look at what resources we have available on DogWellNet, we are a fully nonprofit group. We have we really only get money if you are donating or through our various sponsors and supporters. If you don't have any money but still want to contribute, there are lots of ways, people power, that we can talk to you about. So make a donation if you're able. Every little bit helps. Or let us know if there's other ways that you might be able to support sharing information about canine health and welfare. And to reach out to us, you can contact us via dogwellnut.com. There's some online forms, or you can email us at the email address below. I will leave this up just to give you maybe 1 or 2 minutes to go again and get your cell phone just before I hand over to Dr. Bell. And just a little reminder that if you want to ask any questions, either about this very whistle-stop tour that I gave you, or as questions occur to you during Dr. Bell's talk, to please use the Q&A option in Zoom so that we're able to best coordinate your questions for the end of the session. And so with that speedy little introduction, I'm very pleased to hand over to Dr. Bell, who has a fantastic talk for us all today. So Dr. Bell, are you running your talk?
I'm getting there.
Oh, wonderful. Perfect.
Okay. All right. Just this. Okay, I want to thank everyone for being with us here today, those that are here live, as well as those that will be viewing us online afterwards. I want to thank the International Partnership for Dogs for hosting this webinar, as well as sponsoring it, and the World Small Animal Veterinary Association, who is also a sponsor of this webinar. And this is Breeding Healthy Quality Dogs, the Veterinarian, Breeder, and Public Roles. So as an introduction and supplement to what Amy has told you about, I am an adjunct professor of clinical genetics at the Tufts University Cummings School of Veterinary Medicine in Massachusetts, USA. I taught the clinical veterinary genetics course to the veterinary students for 25 years before becoming adjunct. I am the chairman of the World Small Animal Veterinary Association Hereditary Disease Committee, and I'm also a volunteer member of the board of directors of the Canine Health Information Center, the OFA. This is a not-for-profit animal health foundation and the largest repository of health testing information on dogs, as well as DNA repository for dogs. But primarily, I am a small animal practitioner. That's my full-time job. I am a solo practitioner. I see primarily pet dogs and and pet cats. So what I see is what is produced by breeders, by commercial breeders, by shelters and rescues, and that is what I've been doing for the past 40 years. So I have an idea of what we see in practice and what we see in the different breeds and mixed breed animals. I am also with my wife Candace and our friend Nikki. We breed Gordon setters. This is on the left is Maddie, who took breed at Westminster several years ago, and on the right is her litter mate Bobby, who lives with us, who attained his junior hunter title, and we celebrated by getting all the sticks and twigs out of his coat there. So I come to you as a classically trained population geneticist. Before I was a veterinarian, so as I went through vet school, I observed what we were seeing and thought about it in terms of populations. I am a clinical practitioner. I am an educator and a breeder. And so this is the background that I bring to you. As a disclaimer, this presentation represents my views based on a lifetime of research studying the genetic health of pedigreed and mixed breed dogs and cats, their population genetics, and breed gene pools. So these do not necessarily represent the positions of IPFD or WSAVA. These are my own conclusions based on a lifetime of work. I've presented over 80 breed health seminars to AKC parent breed clubs, including analysis of deep pedigree gene pools for gene pool analysis, and some of those results and some of the findings will be presented today. So first with the polling, I want you to take your phones and either use the QC code there to pull up the polling, or you can go to a website, pollev.com/IPFD, and all of the poll questions will be coming up on that format. So I'm asking, where are you from? You can click anywhere on the screen where you're coming from. You can click once. Somebody's down there in Antarctica. Maybe, maybe not. Someone's on a little sailboat off the tip of South Africa. So we have a lot from the US and a lot from Europe. We've got one South American so far. So this is just to orient you. So all of the poll questions will pop up on your screen as we move along. Okay, so let's get to my first poll question for you. True or false? All pedigreed dog breeds are inbred. Give some more time for people to get oriented. So either scan the code there or go to the website pollev.com/IPFD. You don't have to register or sign in. You can dismiss any of the initial things that come up and just go right to the polling. Okay, so let's reveal our answers. So 2/3 of you feel that all pedigree dog breeds are inbred, and 1/3 say false. And I'm going to refer to dog breeds as pedigreed breeds, not purebred breeds, because the word purebred is really a misnomer. They're not purebred. All dogs came from a mixture of dogs to start with, but then they are entered into a registry with pedigrees and have a defined ancestral background. So we are going to refer to them as pedigree dog breeds. Okay, and my last question before the body of the talk here. My breed has detrimentally limited genetic diversity. True or false? Okay, and we'll reveal. And so about three quarters say true, and about a third of you, or 30%, say false. So the first question, all breeds are inbred, the answer is true, and we'll talk about that. And then this question, my breed has detrimentally limited genetic diversity. Let's present the data today and let you decide that at the end of the webinar, whether your breed has detrimentally limited genetic diversity. Because what we're saying there means that all breeds are doomed to extinction based on what we are doing. And if we base it on what we are doing right now, maybe that could be the case. But if we do what we're supposed to be doing in breeding dogs and in regulating the breeding of dogs, then the answer would be different. So let's see where we go from there. Dog breeds are like different ethnic populations of people. All people on Earth are human, Homo sapiens, but we are not all closely related. Ethnic populations originally arose due to geographic isolation. So the scientists tell us that we came out of Africa 60 to 65,000 years ago and went to the Middle East, and some went west to Europe, some went east to India, and then Southeast Asia and Oceanica. Some went up into the Nordic areas, some went into the Far East, and then crossed the bridge into North America and down to South America. There are some ancient mutated genes and hereditary diseases that are shared by different ethnic populations, or shared by all ethnic populations, certain diseases that everybody get. In some ethnic populations, certain common genetic disorders occur at a higher frequency, like high blood pressure or diabetes in certain ethnic populations. Some ethnic populations are prone to certain genetic diseases that are seen rarely in other populations. Does this sound similar to what we see in our dog breeds? Dog breed development followed human migration and evolution paths. So as man migrated, and woman migrated across the world, they brought their dogs with them for their selected purposes. Canis familiaris is the dog species. Dogs develop to live alongside man, honing their natural skills of hunting, guarding, hearing, and protection, barking, scenting, and protection. Common genetic disorders are caused by ancient disease liability genes that preceded breed formation, and they're shared by many breeds and mixed breeds. So these are the common genetic disorders we see across all dogs. So this is a figure taken from a manuscript published by Shaston Lindblad-Towe from the Broad Institute and her group that showed the evolution of the dog from multiple evolutionary events from the wolf species, and then the development of the early dogs into later dogs that were broken down based on function, hunting, herding, protection, and so forth, and then down into the individual breeds. So the common genetic disorders, the most common genetic disorder we see in dogs is allergies, and we pretty much see that in all breeds, although some breeds have higher frequencies than others. Hip dysplasia, patelloluxation, especially in the smaller statured breeds, aortic stenosis in a handful of breeds. And so, depending on when the mutation occurred that causes these diseases, and where in the evolutionary process of the development of breeds, that's where we would see these diseases segregating. So common canine genetic disorders, allergies, number one, hip and elbow dysplasia, patelloluxation or slipping kneecaps, mitral valvular disease is the most common cardiac disease, anterior cruciate ligament disease. And most people would say, well, wait a second, that's an injury, but there is a breed predisposition for that, and it is highly heritable. So this is a strongly heritable genetic disease. Inflammatory bowel disease, inherited cancers, the big ones being lymphosarcoma, hemangiosarcoma, osteosarcoma, and mast cell tumors, as well as others. Diabetes mellitus, inherited cardiomyopathies, which tend to be more breed specific. non-struvite bladder stones. We know that struvite stones are caused by infection, but all the other bladder stones are caused by inborn errors of metabolism or inherited genes. Inherited hypothyroidism, which is autoimmune thyroiditis, retained testicles, and umbilical hernias, just to name a lot of the common disorders seen across all dogs, mixed breed and purebred. Let's talk a little bit about selection, because that really is the basis of where we get our over 400 different breeds around the world and how we manipulate the genes of our dogs in order to get the breeds that we have and how to get the health that we need. So let's say that this circle is the gene pool of your breed. And we're going to, and we want to select a dog for breeding that does not have a certain genetic disorder that occurs about a third of a frequency in the breed. And so this is the only area of the gene pool that we're looking for dogs that have normality for that disease process. And we also want good heads or good gating. So we're selecting for positive traits as we breed our dogs. So we're looking to put another layer of selection, and now just with this area. And then we have some genetic tests that are available in our breed that we're going to run, and another one. And very quickly, what we see is that there's only a small portion of the gene pool of dogs that we can select from that fulfill all of our layers of selection. So what does that tell us? It tells us that if we are going to use a layer of selection, use something for selection, it needs to define and actually separate those that have that trait or disorder or do not. If we're using false selection or something that does not really have to do with the health of our breed, then we are actually limiting our ability to select for the things that we should be selecting for, and it diminishes the diversity of our breed because it is eliminating dogs that should not be eliminated from breeding. So selection is very important in how we apply it. Let's talk about breed formation. The development of breeds occurred through artificial selection for body type, color, coat type, behavior, and conformational aspects. As breed lines become more specialized and stud books closed, those who did not conform to the standard or exhibited health issues were removed from breeding. So this is a pedigree of a single dog. And this is of a typical breed, going back to founders. And this is the pedigree right here that you're used to looking at. A dog, its sire, its dam, the sire, sire, and dam, and so forth here. Back here is the origination of the breed, where individuals were bred together for a purpose. And those that produced what we wanted are then used for breeding, and those that did not produce what was wanted were discarded. So there's a lot of discarding of dogs here. And so there's a breeding and purging process that occurs for many generations until that breed begins to breed true and breed healthy. And then you get to a breed expansion stage where the dogs and the population expands so that you have greater choices of what dogs you're going to be able to use. And in actuality, since this is the pedigree of only one dog and all of the dogs behind it, the entire breed population continues to go up this way and down this way to encompass all of the other dogs in that breed there. So it actually is a large cone that would represent the entire population of the breed. As only a small number of dogs are used to produce the next generation, it is like a genetic bottleneck in every generation, and rapid change can occur in the breed's genetic background. So only depending on the size or population of the breed, large population breeds, probably 3 to 5% at most of the dogs are used for breeding in the next generation. For small population breeds, it might be up to 11 or even 15%, but it's still only a small part of the gene pool that's used for breeding. And in that way, and the rest of the breed is discarded. It doesn't contribute to the next generation. So in that way, rapid change can occur from breeding selection. Those individuals who demonstrate and propagate desirable characteristics will have an increasing influence on the gene pool through multiple generations of descendants. Dogs that produced offspring that were unhealthy or inferior to a standard are not used. Their influence and that of their ancestors is diminished. So all breeds have several influential ancestors that appear far back in the pedigrees, but pass on a high percentage of their genes to every individual in the breed. And this occurs in every single breed. This is what breeding is about, whether it's large animal species or small animal species. Purposeful breeding has this type of background. As an example, I'm using here a Cavalier King Charles Spaniel. It has nothing to do, and this has nothing to do with health. This just has to do with the formation of the breed. All breeds look like this. So for the average Cavalier King Charles Spaniel of today, a third of the genes come from Daywell Roger, who was born in 1945. 30% from Cannon Ho Ritchie, who was born in 1941. Over a quarter of the genes from Anne's son, who was born in 1927. So a dog from 1927 contributes as much genes as a grandparent, a dog from almost 100 years ago. And this is what you see in every single breed, these influential ancestors. And of course, this doesn't all add up to 100 because Ritchie is behind Roger and Anne's son is behind Ritchie. And so these are all generational in what they're passing on. But this is what the background of breeds looks like. In the bearded collie breed, this shows the influence of ancestors by the decades from the 1960s through the 2000s, where Bailey of Bothkanar in the 60s passed on average 29.6% to every bearded collie and is now up to 32.6. His influence continues to increase because his descendants, many, many generations down, continue to produce quality and are preferentially selected for breeding. Jeannie of Bothkanar, her influence has continued to slowly decrease. So what she is producing is not being selected as much for being passed on. Dandy, a founder of the breed, his influence continues to increase. And so you see these differences and changes over time. Some dogs are passing on a large amount or a significant amount and then all of a sudden disappear because what they are producing is not of quality and people have not used their offspring for producing the next generation. This is a pedigree, and again, for those that are used to looking at pedigrees, the sire is on the top and the dam is on the bottom. The sire's sire, sire's dam, dam's sire, dam's dam, and ends further back. In this way, we color in individuals that appear more than once in the pedigree, so you can see where the line breeding is occurring. And so this dog is not a tightly bred dog. As you can see, there are not a lot of common ancestors in the 6th generation pedigree. This dog's inbreeding coefficient, and we'll talk a little more about that in a sec, but inbreeding coefficient measures homozygosity, or the pairing of like genes on the paired chromosomes that come from the parents. And so on 5 generations, just these 5 generations here, the inbreeding coefficient is 1.3, fairly outbred individual. Based on 10 generations, this dog's inbreeding coefficient is 6.2%. So we'd expect 6.2% homozygosity just looking at the 10 generations of her pedigree of Sybil. But if you look at all of the generations going all the way back to founders, her inbreeding coefficient is 23.1%. 23.1% homozygosity based on pedigree going back to founders. And that, most people would say, is an inbred dog or a tightly bred dog. 25% is what we get from a father-daughter or a full brother, full sister mating, the types of inbreeding that not many of us would be doing. But that number is what's up there. And we need to understand that every breed has that number as its background based on the foundation and the formation of the breed. So when we look at Sybil's pedigree analysis, what we find is that the most influential dog in her pedigree is Withy Brook Brock, who contributes over 25% of the genes to Sybil. He doesn't appear until the 14th generation in the pedigree, but appears over 500,000 times in the pedigree. If you look at Bob Lloyd and Cassie, who both produce far more than a great-grandparent, but didn't appear until the 17th generation, and appear over 29 and 28 million times in the pedigree, this shows you an understanding of the background inbreeding that occurs in these breeds. Appearing once in the 17th generation, you consider first generation as parents, they contribute 50%. Grandparents is the second generation, they contribute 25%. Third generation great-grandparents, they contribute 12.5%. So you divide that in half 14 more times, and that's how much one position in the 17th generation contributes to Sybil. But if you appear 29 million times, you get 16.8%. And this is the background. She is not a tightly bred dog. Her closest line breeding is in the 5th generation with Blackstorm, who appears for the first time in the 5th generation, appears 11 times and contributes 11.5%. So let's talk a little bit about chromosomal inheritance. All dogs have 39 pairs of chromosomes, one in each pair from its sire and one from its dam. So these are the autosomes. So on the 3rd chromosome here, on this location on a chromosome is a gene. And on this location on the opposite chromosome from the opposite parent is a complementary gene. So this is called a locus, or the location of a gene. If those two genes are called alleles that make up a gene pair. And if those two genes are the exact same gene, then they are homozygous. And if there's two different copies of that gene, then they are heterozygous. And the X and the Y are the sex chromosomes. So chromosomal crossovers during meiosis, we learned this in high school, produce sperm or eggs with a mixture of chromosomal segments from its two parents. So the pair of chromosomes that the dog receives from its parents, when in the production of sperm or eggs, there is a crossover during meiosis, during metaphase, and then those chromosomes are put into the sperm and the egg with a mixture of chromosomal segments from both the sire and the dam. So entire chromosomes are not inherited from one generation to the next. The segments of chromosome that came from one parent is called a haplotype block. But what we understand is that this came from the previous generation as a single block, but that block actually encompasses several chromosomal blocks from ancestors further back in the pedigree. And the further back in the pedigree that block comes from, the smaller that segment is going to be due to crossovers that occur with each generation. Selection for positive traits will cause the inheritance of chromosomal segments from the parents containing causative genes. So if there's a gene that we're selecting in here, all of the other genes in that haplotype block are being inherited with that gene. Selection against deleterious traits or diseases will cause the loss of a chromosomal segment containing causative genes. As crossovers occur through the generations, the size of the chromosomal segment containing genes under positive and negative selection can get smaller. So if there's a selected gene for that breed in this area here, that piece of chromosome, as it goes through the generations, will get smaller, but still will carry what is being selected for. As dogs are line bred on, appearing in both the sire and dam sides of the pedigree, this can cause haplotype blocks to pair up, causing what are called runs of homozygosity. So if you have matching segments of chromosome, then these are all going to be, all the genes in these segments are going to be homozygous due to common inheritance. Redefining genes would be expected to be collected in runs of homozygosity due to selection over time. Excuse me. These include breed-selected traits for size, coat color and texture, behavior, skeletal morphology, and other traits. Even without close line breeding, selection for positive traits will increase their homozygosity, having originated from distant ancestors. So whether you are line breeding or outbreeding, if you're selecting for specific traits, you are going to create homozygosity for those traits that are being selected for or against. Any selection will cause a loss of genetic diversity. This loss is not detrimental to the population if it is directly related to increasing its superiority. Any selection over generations will create homozygosity, uniform purposeful selection for breeding goals, and diminished frequencies of undesirable genes, causing traits or disorders that are undesirable. So selection equals homozygosity. And population geneticists understands that any selection creates homozygosity. You cannot not have homozygosity unless you completely ignore any selection and prevent any selection from occurring. Homozygosity is not inherently correlated to impaired genetic health, nor does it need to be blindly or artificially controlled. Mars Genoscope molecular genetic homozygosity testing. These are data from Mars Genoscoper or Wisdom Panel results. Mixed breed dogs have 55% homozygosity, and pedigree dogs have, on average, have 64% homozygosity. So it's not that mixed breed dogs have zero homozygosity and pedigree dogs are all homozygous. The difference between just being a dog and being a pedigree dog on average is about 9% homozygosity. So it's not a huge difference in homozygosity between mixed breed and pedigree dogs. So let's talk a little bit about diseases and disorders, or what I call, pay attention, the dark side of breed development. So this is one of my favorite cartoons, Get Fuzzy, and Rob says, ever hear the expression familiarity breeds contempt? And Satchel ponders and he says, no, in the dog world, we say familiarity breeds hip dysplasia. So this is what the general public thinks about dog breeding, is that because you're breeding within breeds that are inbred, that causes disease. And that is not so. It causes homozygosity, which increases positive traits as well as the possibility of negative traits. So here's our next poll. Are mixed breed and designer bred dogs genetically healthier than pedigreed dogs? Are mixed breed dogs healthier than pedigreed dogs? Yes or no? Okay. So 84% say no and 16% say yes. So that's good. We're gonna talk about that. All right. So how do breed-related deleterious genes accumulate? Many different ways. Direct selection for disease-associated phenotypes, including extreme phenotypes. Linkage to selected traits, where you're selecting for a certain trait and a gene that causes a disease is close on the chromosome to the gene that causes that trait, and it passes forward with it. So that's genetic linkage. Carried by popular sires. Genetic drift, which is just the random traveling of genes in the background of dogs by happenstance. And most importantly, the absence of selection against deleterious phenotypes. If you are not selecting against disease, you will get disease. You will not get health. So purposeful selection for disease liability. With extreme phenotypic selection, breeders can purposefully select for disease liability and cause breed-related disease. So you're not purposefully selecting for disease, but if we go with the more is better attitude and keep on selecting for more and more extreme, it can become disease predisposing. So the extreme brachycephalic phenotype for brachycephalic syndrome, extremes in size, both large as well as small, extremes in hair coat, extremes in skin wrinkles, in extreme and facial folds, extremes in angulation. So this is where that can cause disease predisposition. Most breed standards do not call for the expression of extreme phenotypes, and so moderation away from extremes that cause disease should be a guiding principle in breeding and in judging. And even if the standard doesn't call for extreme phenotype, if that is what's occurring in the breed, then the breed standard must be rewritten to explicitly state that you do not want extremes and you want moderation of those factors. And judges should be instructed not to put up the most extreme dogs, because the most extreme dogs tend to be the flashiest and eye-catching. And so judges are judges because they're able to discern, and they should be able to discern what is too much and take guidance from the breed in judging education. And tell judges, do not put up the most extreme dogs, put up moderation that is going to be more healthy. So the popular sire syndrome. This is a geneticist pedigree where circles are females and squares are males. Horizontal lines are matings and vertical lines are offspring. And let's say that, for example, this represents a diverse breed and a male comes along and everyone oohs and ahs and they begin to breed to him. And different bitches from different areas of the gene pool are brought to him, and they like what they're seeing, what's being produced. They start line breeding on him. And very quickly, within a short generation or so, his genes are dispersed throughout the entire gene pool. That is the popular sire syndrome. It is one of the most influential factors in restricting breed gene pool diversity. The overuse of a popular sire quickly disseminates his genes throughout the gene pool without the benefit of evaluation over time. And that's the key point. Without the benefit of evaluation over time. You don't know exactly what he is passing on until you can see several generations of what is being produced. More in the background, the overuse of a popular sire causes the loss of other quality male lines that should be contributing to the gene pool. So there's the loss of genetic diversity. Other male lines from a diverse gene pool should be contributing to the next generation. But if they're being brought only to a single sire and sometime his offspring and his grand offspring in a line of popular sires, that is what restricts genetic diversity. A popular sire's influence is different from that of an influential ancestor. Some people might say, well, wait a second, what about those influential ancestors at 30%? Well, their contribution is continually evaluated through its descendants who have to compete with others for breeding status. So generation after generation, their descendants have to be preferentially selected in order to continue their influence. And lastly, if a popular sire is found to pass on deleterious genes, the resultant purging process also causes the loss of influence of all the quality dam lines that were brought to him, and again, a significant loss of genetic diversity. So this is a big thing to pay attention to in breeding dogs. All individuals carry some deleterious mutations. Quality individuals who propagate will also propagate through deleterious mutations. These can cause breed-related disease if they are disseminated and increase in frequency through the founder's effect. Individual liability genes can cause embryonic death, thus resulting in smaller litter size or infertility. So the breed needs to monitor if they are losing litter size, because that can be due to an accumulation of disease liability genes causing embryonic death, increased neonatal death, or breed-specific genetic disease. This is not a function of homozygosity or inbreeding, but of the accumulation and propagation of specific disease liability genes that need to be selected against. Molecular genetic studies of breeds documents the homozygosity and haplotype blocks that mirror the pedigree-based inbreeding coefficients and influential ancestor coefficients. So if we say that this is chromosome 7 and within a breed, and so these could be the 2 chromosomes in a dog, and these are several dogs all lined up, and we see this haplotype block here, this run of homozygosity due to selection, because somewhere in here is a selected gene that breeders have been selecting for specific traits or for health. These are necessary and expected consequences of breed formation and evolution. This is not a mistake, homozygosity. This is what breeding is about, is creating quality dogs that reproduce themselves and that are healthy and getting rid of the disease-related genes. When analyzing entire breed population databases back to founders, every dog breed, regardless of its population size, has the same findings. High, deep pedigree average inbreeding coefficients or homozygosity, low effective population size or limited number of founders or ancestors contributing to diversity, high average relationship coefficients to influential ancestors, and diverse within breed lines. Breed diversity is different lines within the breed that are different from each other. Breeds with small populations look the same as breeds with large populations did much earlier in their evolution and development. They just need to grow their gene pools and grow their population size. So let's talk a little bit about genetic diversity, or unfortunately, what has now become a standard of diversity breeding to some people. In response to perceived concerns with genetic diversity, some advocate for species survival plan type outbreeding programs that were designed for endangered species. And these recommend to only outbreed, never line breed, but only outbreed to those that are the least related to your dog. But what this does is it homogenizes breeds and erases the genetic differences between individuals. So by outbreeding to the least related, you are taking 2 dogs that are least related to each other and then making them related in the next generation. Breed gene pool diversity requires distinct lines in order to create selective pressure. If you need to improve quality, or if you need to improve health, you need to find dogs that are different than your dogs that have that quality or have that health. So we need within breed diversity. Outbreeding plans are self-limiting because as you remove the genetic differences between individuals, it becomes increasingly harder to outbreed or find mates that are genetically unlike each other. Outbreeding will not change the frequency of deleterious genes. For dispersed breed-related deleterious genes, outbreeding will not reduce the frequency of affected individuals. They will just appear in a random fashion. So for breed-related disease, it doesn't matter. The genes that cause those diseases are already dispersed in the gene pool. So whether you line breed or you outbreed, the chances of doubling up on those genes and producing disease are the same. It's just less predictable because now it's occurring at random. And if you want to know what that looks like, look at our domestic cat population. 95% of our cats are random bred cats. But as veterinarians, we see genetic disease in our random bred cats all of the time. Feline lower urinary tract disease, diabetes mellitus, allergies. So it's not that we don't see disease because they're outbred, we're just seeing it randomly. None of the types of mating systems, inbreeding, line breeding, outbreeding, crossbreeding, change the frequency of defective genes or their dissemination. We must directly select against them and create homozygosity of the good genes for health and quality. Recommendations for selection to increase heterozygosity or minor allele frequencies do not select against disease liability genes. And actually, if So if the scientists tell us here's a major haplotype block or allele frequency, and here's a minor one, and we need to select those with the minor allele frequency to increase the frequency of the minor alleles, it probably is minor through generations of selection. And if we just make the minor allele frequencies major frequencies once again, it will likely reverse the effects of positive selection through blind manipulation of minor alleles. Selection for heterozygosity selects against the good homozygosity, accomplished through generations of selection. It blindly increases minor frequency segments and chromosomal segments without knowing what is contained in those segments. We don't know what are in those minor frequency segments, but they're telling us to increase their frequency. Recommendations to increase the diversity of major histocompatibility complex haplotypes. And this is something that has been done and recommended. But in no breeds has general limited MHC diversity, having 5 alleles versus 3 haplotype alleles, impaired breed immunity. All studies of autoimmune disease, immune deficiency, or pathogen susceptibility identify very specific MHC haplotypes, the groups of those 3 MHC alleles, or disease-related genes. So once again, these are haplotypes that are disease-related. Their homozygosity or heterozygosity in general does not alter the immunity of the breed. So in summary, endangered species preservation calls for randomization, and dog breeding calls for directed selection. These are 2 completely different processes, and saying that we should use the tools for one for the other is just not the way to go. We are using endangered species. Everyone needs to reproduce and reproduce randomly. Dog breeding, a limited number of individuals reproduce to produce the next generation, and we need to select for the best of those to reproduce and create homozygosity of quality as well as health. When breeds show fixation of deleterious traits or significantly diminished fertility or fecundity, they may require an SSP type plan or to open the stud book to importation or crossbreeding. In the Norwegian Lundhunds, that is the case. In Dalmatians that no longer had the gene for normal purine metabolism, that was the case. So there are individual cases where this can be the right answer. But most breeds do not find themselves in this position and only require proper selection to improve their gene pools and their genetic health. So it really depends on what you're seeing in your breed. Don't let a molecular geneticist tell you that your breed lacks diversity based on a bunch of numbers. The healthier breed is based on your breed health surveys and what you're seeing in your breed. Managing breeds requires conservation efforts, not species survival plans. And Dr. Phil Spangenberg at Virginia Polytech, he studies historical livestock breeds, but it also applies to dog breeds as well. So unfortunately, commercial genetic testing companies equate genetic diversity with homozygosity measurements. And the genetic testing companies are great companies. They do great work. They have valid results. But what I disagree with sometimes is their genetic counseling or their interpretation of those results. Homozygosity does not equal genetic diversity. Breed genetic diversity has to do with the differences between dogs in the breadth of the breed's gene pool. If you have a tightly bred individual at one end of the gene pool, homozygous, and a tightly bred individual on the other side of the gene pool, high homozygosity, you breed them together, you're producing heterozygous outbred offspring. Has that changed the genetic diversity of your breed? No, it reflects what the most recent breeding has done. And these are tools to use, outbreeding and line breeding, for specific purposes, to bring in new genes or to fix and create uniformity in other genes. Breed health should not be judged on statistics of inbreeding coefficients or homozygosity, but on breed health surveys that accurately document the frequency of genetic disease. So genetic diversity is breeder diversity. It is the varied opinions of breeders as to what constitutes the ideal dog and their selection of breeding stock that maintains breed diversity. It's everyone doing something a little different. Some like this line, some like that line. Some want to bring in something new and they'll outbreed. Some want to fix something, they'll line breed. Some people want to go with diversity breeding and only outbreed. Great. Everyone doing something different is what maintains the genetic diversity of a breed. So let's talk about improving breed population health through health-conscious breeding, because that is what it is really all about. Early on, breeders judiciously removed animals from breeding that were unhealthy, could not excel, or did not conform to a healthy standard. Somewhere along the way, responsibility to select for health and produce healthy offspring disappeared from breeding. People just breed and expect healthy offspring. If artificial selection does not select for health or selects for deleterious phenotypes, then there can be no expectation of genetic health. The genetic health of the dogs and the breed will decline. Absolutely. Health is not an integral part of breeding. You need to select for health or you will not get health. And that's what we see when we have the issues that we're dealing with right now. Genetic screening is a requirement. It is not a choice. If you're breeding, you need to do health-based screening. So who is a reputable breeder? It is one that does genetic screening. If not, you need to find a different hobby or a profession. You need to find something that you can do that you can actually be good at. Because if you're not doing genetic screening, you are not doing a good job as a dog breeder. The proper use of genetic screening increases breeding choices. If you have a test for carriers, you can breed your quality carrier to a normal testing dog for recessive disease and select a quality normal testing offspring to replace it in the next generation and lose that gene in one generation. I don't have time to get into different breeding schemes that we can use with complexly inherited disease and recessive disease and depending on the frequency of disorders and the types of genetic tests that are available and the validity of genetic tests that are available. These are all aspects that we need to consider, but we're not dealing with that today. Official genetic screening results should be made available to prospective breeders and to the pet and breeding stock purchasing public. All purposeful breeding, whether pedigreed, designer bred, or mixed breed, requires pre-breeding health assessments appropriate for the breed or the body type of the dogs being bred. We now have a lot of mixed breed breeding going on because we have a large bred for rescue organization that is going on. People are being told, get rescue dogs, adopt, don't shop. The bottom line is the commercial breeding industry is necessary to provide dogs for the world. There are not enough dog breeders and strays available to produce all the dogs that the world desires for their homes. So commercial breeding has to exist as an industry. And many commercial breeders, especially I know in the United States and somewhat in other countries, have realized that to produce the best product and to sell the best possible dogs, that they do health testing. But we need to understand that whether it's a mixed breed dog or whether it's a pedigreed dog, we must select for health based on the breed or body type. In today's environment, not testing for documented breed or body type related hereditary disease is irresponsible breeding. So breeding dogs is all about selection, selection, selection. The only way to select against specific genetic disorders is to specifically select against the causative or liability genes through direct genetic testing or phenotypic genetic screening. There is no quick fix to health. There isn't a quick fix that says outbreed and you'll be healthy, okay? The only way to get health is to select for health. The most common genetic diseases of dogs are complexly inherited, involving several genes and environmental factors. Most have no genetic or DNA tests. Many have no screening or diagnostic tests and require medical history for diagnosis. Epilepsy, bloat, allergies outside of an allergic reactive period. So many require medical history review for diagnosis. Breeding control requires knowledge of familial history of affected individuals for complexly inherited disease. Pre-breeding health screening. So this is a veterinary health exam for to determine the worthiness of a dog to be used for breeding. This isn't just your annual exam by your veterinarian. This is you bringing your dog to your vet and saying, I'm looking to breed this dog. I need a pre-breeding health exam. It includes examination of the major organ systems, musculoskeletal, heart, eye, GI, respiratory, skin, behavioral abnormalities. It should also include breed-specific genetic screening for that breed or body type. Many kennel clubs and associated health organizations list the breed-specific pre-breeding genetic screening tests for those breeds, both phenotypic tests, hips, eyes, and genotypic DNA tests. Test results should be available on registrations or publicly available health registry databases. In my country, the AKC lists the health test results directly on the registration paperwork and the pedigrees. These should be linked to pedigrees, the health results for familial risk and estimated breeding values. In the US, the OFA has vertical pedigrees, so we can actually see the risk that's coming down the pedigree. And I know we have estimated breeding values in other similar programs in other countries. And this identifies health conscious breeders by seeing that they're doing pre-breeding health screening. So my last poll for today, what genetic screening testing do you do as a breeder or as a veterinarian? And whoops, pre-breeding health exams. And on the bottom there is no genetic screening or testing. Sorry that that isn't showing up on the entire screen there. Okay, and we'll reveal. Okay, so we've got a lot of hip evaluations and elbows. We've got eyes. We've got DNA testing, and we have people that are saying that they do pre-breeding health examinations, which is a good thing. And none of you are saying that you do no selection for health. So good for you. Pre-breeding health screening evaluates the health worthiness of the dog for breeding. If the public demands healthier dogs, then this is where it must occur. Pre-breeding health screening is health conscious breeding. It should become universal as equine pre-purchase exams. So if you're in the horse world, you know if you're going to purchase a horse, you want your veterinarian to examine that horse and tell you that that horse is going to be able to do what you want it to do, that it doesn't have laminitis or navicular disease or other things that are going to limit your ability to use that horse. Well, pre-breeding health screening, and that's an absolute, you know, if you don't get an equine pre-purchase exam, you're really not being very smart. We need that same mindset. You're not very smart to purchase a dog whose parents do not have pre-breeding health screening. This should be a prerequisite to getting a dog. So lastly, what are our roles in making all dogs genetically healthier? So what we all need to do, each of us in our little positions, is to provide the framework for breed improvement, change breed standards to allow dogs to live healthy, normal lives if the breed standard is misrepresenting what is needed for health. Promote genetic screening of all breeding stock. Support open health registries for publication of genetic test results. Educate the public to purchase only from ethical breeders that embrace the above standards. So for kennel clubs and breeding associations, they should monitor breed standards and talk with their individual parent breed clubs about whether their breed standards are actually selecting for health. List breed-specific pre-breeding health screening recommendations recommended by the parent clubs based on the health issues of their breeds. Provide pedigree-linked genetic screening databases and estimated breeding values, because most of the issues we deal with health are complexly inherited and require knowledge of the familial incidence of disease. Establish guidelines for health conscious breeding, and provide public education on their websites and in their literature. Breed-specific clubs and associations should change their breed standards to moderate extreme selection for disease predisposing phenotypes, monitor breed health through regular health surveys, determine breed-specific pre-breeding health screening requirements and in consultation with the experts, establish guidelines and programs to encourage health-conscious breeding. Some breed clubs will have a star system for dogs that based on the health testing that they do. Some dogs that breeds at their specialties can have special classes of health bred, a chick class for dogs that have passed, that they've done their health assessments, and provide public education, what you should look for in a breeder. Breeders should undergo veterinary pre-breeding health evaluations of prospective breeding dogs, perform breed and body type specific genetic screening or testing on prospective breeding dogs, select breeding stock to improve the health and quality of their next generation. It's one thing to do your pre-breeding evaluations and do your health testing, but you've got to use those results to select for the healthier dog. If you've got mildly dysplastic or fair rated dogs, you want to breed to a good or an excellent, or a dog with a tighter hip or a better rating based on the system that you're using, so that you can upgrade your dogs and improve them in the next generation. Avoid popular sires. Participate in breed club administered breed health surveys so the breed can understand the changing issues that are occurring in their breed. Provide official documentation of pre-breeding health screening to puppy buyers. It is the only way that they can recognize that you are a health conscious breeder. If breeders say, yeah, that was done, but they don't provide the paperwork, they haven't done it. Anyone that's done the legwork of health testing is happy to provide those results. And if you don't have puppies available and someone contacts you, spend some time to educate that person that contacted you about seeking out health conscious breeders. Educate the public on their roles. Veterinarians need to educate themselves on common and breed-specific health issues. We as a profession are ill-equipped to deal with hereditary disease. We need to get much better about understanding about genetic disease and about the propagation of genetic disease. For prospective breeding dogs, perform pre-breeding health exams. Recommend breed or body type appropriate genetic screening tests if they need to be done by specialists. Provide official documentation of those results to the owners, and provide health examinations of puppies prior to going to new homes. For new puppy appointments, review all the paperwork provided by the breeder or broker for evidence of health screening. So tell when they make the appointment for a new puppy or a new kitten, the veterinarians should say, bring all the paperwork that you were given when you received that puppy or kitten, so for their review, and scan it into their file. Have owners ask their breeder for official documentation of genetic screening results on parents and or puppies if it's not apparent in the paperwork. If documentation of health screening is not available, perform early age genetic screening for common testable hereditary disorders that can affect pet dogs, whether it's the MDR1 mutation, whether for preventable disease and diseases that we can intervene and make them healthy, those need to be done at a young age. The public needs to educate themselves on the health issues and recommended breed-specific genetic screening tests. Ask breeders for official documentation of genetic screening tests on parents and or puppies. Put it to the breeder, where is the health screening on these dogs? Because I was told that that's something that we need to look for. So let the breeders know that you're looking for it. Buy puppies from health conscious breeders and provide this breeder supplied paperwork on the pedigree and health screening to their veterinarian for their dog's record. Government and judicial bodies need to seek advice and documentation from multiple experts in hereditary disease and dog breeding, from veterinary schools, veterinary associations and experts, canine health foundations, and breed club representatives. You know, speaking to one person at a vet school in your country that says all pedigree dogs are, are inbred and are riddled with genetic disease does not help a government or judicial body to make the right decisions to actually improve the health of dogs. If appropriate, enact legislation or decide cases that promote health-conscious breeding. Breeding bans are only necessary if there are no scientifically viable remedies to improve breed health. If a breed's distinction is actually a genetic disease that harms them, then maybe that breed needs to be retired. And I use that word retired because it's a better word than ban. But if that breed can be improved, banning that breed prevents reputable breeders from improving the genetic health of their breeds. So we need to allow breeders to improve them. If you want to monitor, if you want to legislate, if you want to regulate, that's fine. But allow breeders to improve their breeds so that we can have healthier dogs. And the breeding guidelines must apply to all purposefully bred dogs, pedigreed, non-pedigreed, and mixed breed dogs. Anyone doing breeding, these regulations must apply to them all, not just to breed clubs and breed club members. So in closing, all populations thrive by avoiding disease predisposing phenotypes, avoiding the popular sire syndrome, utilizing quality individuals from the breadth of the population to expand the gene pool, monitoring genetic health issues through regular health surveys, doing genetic testing and screening for breed-related disorders, participating in open health registries to manage genetic disorders, and constant selection for both quality and health. And I close with a quote from the past chairman of the American Kennel Club Board of Directors, Bill Feeney, who famously has said, all dogs deserve to live healthy lives, and we need to help them do that. Thank you, and I'll pass this back to the IPFD for questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bell. I really appreciate your talk. We've had a large number of questions. I'm just trying to open up a video of myself, but we might have to do this without you seeing. Ah, there I am. My face. We have a large number of questions, and thank you for submitting them to the Q&A. We have about 15-ish minutes remaining, though we can overrun a wee little bit. But just to kick off to answer some of the major questions that we've had before I hand over some specific questions to Dr. Bell, this presentation will be available after this event today, and we will also be capturing all of the questions that we have been able to get today, including the ones in the Q&A session, to respond to in a written statements as well, so that you're able to, if you have to leave or if we're not able to get to your question, you will be able to get an answer within the next few days, most likely. In addition, some of the questions that you asked specifically have related to wanting more information about specific research. So again, we will send an email after this event when the Q&A is ready so that you can find those direct links to that research. Another question that has been particularly repeated both in the Q&A and in the chat is asking where you can find information about what genetic tests or genetic screening schemes are, like phenotypic schemes, are available. Again, I encourage you to look at dogwellnet.com because we encapsulate all of the international, including North America, resources in one location, so you can see what is in your own country and what other countries are using as well. And if you happen to be in North America, of course, looking at the AKC and CHIC and OFA resources, which are all OFA and CHIC, especially our open access and free information, would be particularly useful as well. Within the DogWellNet, there's also a number of resources available about different breed-specific schemes with regards to improving genetic diversity or healthy breeding. So I encourage you to explore that afterwards.
Yeah,
So
many of the countries, the Nordic countries, have some great programs, but
yes,
many of the countries, kennel clubs, that the Kennel Club and others around the world have really excellent schemes. So wherever you live, you need to look at those resources, and the IPFD does an excellent job of compiling all of those together.
thank you for that. Thank you for that compliment. Wonderful. Dr. Bell, I'm going to try to summarize a few of these questions so that we can get to a number of them. And we've had 3 or 4 questions and counting about that that wonderful number of like when is too much in terms of inbreeding, how inbred is too inbred, or what generation is considered line breeding, or how many generations do you need to consider with COI. So whilst we will try to go through the Q&A and be a bit more specific, I wonder if you could spend a little bit more time just touching on like where a breeder might want to like aim for or
Okay.
avoid aim for, if you
All right.
understand.
Yeah, I'll try to be succinct so we can get as many questions as possible, but that's a
Yeah.
good question because I did want to touch on that as well because
How
of
much is
the
too much?
because of the big push against homozygosity. I needed to educate you guys about what homozygosity and what breeds actually are. But the bottom line is we're not, it would be just as bad to breed for the most homozygosity as it is to breed for the least homozygosity. These are tools. Um, some breeds were based on breeding on a very limited kindred that had a certain trait, and they built their population from that. And those breeds tend to have higher total inbreeding coefficients. And the molecular genetic inbreeding coefficients that the companies are coming up with are accurate and more accurate than a pedigree, because the pedigree is going to have missing individuals in it, whereas molecular genetics just measures it in that way. You don't want to just willy-nilly increase a inbreeding coefficient just for the number. What you want to do is to breed to select for what you want and use those tools appropriately. So if the average coefficient for a breed is higher, and some breeds were based on a working phenotype, so dogs are brought together that fulfilled a purpose, and those breeds tend to have lower average inbreeding coefficients, but it doesn't make them healthier. Some of them, some breeds with lower average coefficients have high frequency genetic disease, and some with high average coefficients do not have as much genetic disease. It's all happenstance of what deleterious genes got passed on to move on. So there isn't a set number, except to say, if it's obvious, if you're getting decreased litter size and issues that relate to inbreeding depression, then maybe the breed needs to outbreed. If whenever you line breed you get bad stuff happening, then you've got a high genetic load of deleterious genes, and you need to expand outward and maybe even open up the stud books to improve that. But the number itself is not as important as the health of what's being produced. That's what I can say.
Thank you. I have a number of interrelated questions relating to management of small breed populations. Before I hand over specifically to Dr. Bell, again, we have small breed population information on DogWellNet, and I will spend some time with the Q&A to provide specific answers to these questions. But the summary, Dr. Bell, is smaller breed numbers have specific challenges. What do you do if you're a small breed and your numbers are scattered worldwide? What do you do if you have something pernicious and you're working in a small breed, such as epilepsy? And what do you do when you have a genetic marker that's been identified in your rare breed with a small population, but there's not good clinical information about whether that disease is important or not? And I have some comments on that as well, but I'd like to hear yours first.
Okay, so you're touching on several things. So first, the primary
It's small
question:
breeds.
small
What do you do
breeds.
when you have a small breed
Okay,
population and you've got some
small breed
worries?
populations need to breed. Okay, you need to expand your populations. Small breeds, the average relationship between individuals is going to be higher, but as you expand that population with each generation, the relationship between your matings can be lower on average because you have a greater number and a greater breadth of that population to select from. So the important part is to breed. Don't be afraid to breed and say, well, we have epilepsy and I'm afraid of producing epilepsy. I'm not going to breed. Your breed's going to disappear. That's a kiss of death. So you need to do your best possible selection and breed and improve with each breeding, each litter, each mating, and each generation. If you have a genetic marker and it has not been definitively linked or definitively determined how it causes disease or that it does cause disease, then it really is not ready for prime time to be used for breeding. You just need to still select against the disease itself, select against families, or if you have a family that has that disease, but you have individuals that do not have that disease, breed to other families within the breed that don't have that disease and try to move away. So you are outbreeding within the population to try to bring in genes for normalcy and lose those genes for those disease processes. But it's important that we use valid genetic tests and make sure that they are actually directly related to the diseases we're trying to select against.
Thank you very much. I know that was a big question. Just to add to that, I would say that again, if you're a small breed person, numerically small breed, that you're in good company. There are many small breeds out there, and a lot of creative solutions to these shared problems exist in other breeds as well. So you might want to find a friend or find a friendly breed that you can learn from. Again, that information is often available online through our resources. And in addition, when you're looking at genetic testing specifically, there are resources available that help identify what tests may be more relevant for your breed and what are maybe still in development or research or indeed not relevant for your breed, even if the marker has been identified. So another kind of group of questions is whether it is better to outcross to a different breed or to, as you put it very kindly, to retire a breed. When do you know that the gig is up and maybe you need to make a dramatic, let's say a dramatic strategy to retain your breed, or when is it time to maybe just this breed is no longer particularly relevant for the canine communities? That make any sense? I've tried to
Sure,
summarize 5 or
sure.
6 questions.
So let me talk about some cat breeds really quickly, because there are some cat breeds that need to be retired. So the Scottish fold cat breed, the genetic mutation that causes the folded ear causes osteochondral dystrophy and significant arthritis as they develop. Their entire tails get fused; they can't even bend their tails, and significant arthritis. There's no way to separate the folded ears from that condition because it's the same gene. That breed needs to be retired. Okay. If you have a breed where there is variation, where you can select for health, then within that breed it's still possible, and there's enough variation. Then within that breed, it's possible to select for health using valid screening tests. So let's talk about extreme brachycephaly. We now have respiratory function grading that can be done so that we can identify dogs that can breathe properly, because it isn't just narrow nostrils or a narrow trachea or a shortened nostril, a shortened muzzle. It is the combination of those that causes a functional problem with their breathing. And selecting dogs that can pass respiratory function testing is going to select for normalcy. Now, some people are looking to breed individuals outside of the pedigree to crossbreed and then to improve their dogs through that way. And I'm not against crossbreeding. And if those dogs can then have a better phenotype and better health and match the breed standard later on down the generations when they're bred back to the parent breed, then maybe the breed club and the registry will accept those into the pedigree again. So I'm not against any type of breeding that can improve health, but it is up to the registries to set the guidelines of how that happens, because otherwise you're also bringing in other deleterious genes that don't exist in your breed, and then have to deal with the aspects of that. And so there are many different aspects. If you can, within your breed, have enough diversity to just positively select for health and quality, then that is probably the smartest way to go.
Thank you so much. We are technically at time, but if you're willing, Dr. Bell, to take just one more question, and then if anyone is able to stay with us to fill in a very, very short survey, we would really, really appreciate it. For
Sure.
the last question, it's specific to hip scoring, but I think there's kind of a general concept around this well between differences between countries. So there was a question about how the veterinary community and many breeders feel between whether hip and elbow scoring at 12 months in Europe versus 24 months in North America is something that should be taken into considerations for breeding. So more generally, if you're scoring at a certain life stage in a dog in one country and a different life stage in another, are you able to make accurate decisions? Are there other considerations you might want to keep in mind? Are you working with the best information using essentially different scoring systems?
So, I mean, in the OFA, we did the research because we used to use 12 months of age. Then we went to 18 months of age, and then we eventually settled on 2 years of age. And the reason for that is that we were missing dogs that were going to have debilitation due to hip dysplasia later on in life. And because hip dysplasia is a complexly inherited disease. So there are genes that control laxity. There are genes that control depth of the acetabulum. There are genes that control liability to osteoarthritis. There are actual genes that show that a dog with laxity will not, may not necessarily develop as much arthritis as a dog that has the genes for osteoarthritis, and that laxity and the bumping of the together of those bones over a lifetime will cause that. If we have a later age radiograph, we can see the changes that will lead to osteoarthritis, the bony changes that may not be visible at 12 months of age. The laxity could be visible, but not the osteoarthritic changes. And I think that's a big difference between the 12-month and the 24-month assessment. And the big difference between the debilitating aspect of hip dysplasia, which is the arthritis that occurs later on. So these are the reasons why the OFA went to 2 years of age. For me, I would, when breeding to a dog from Europe, I would prefer to see an older age assessment because it gives us a little more, you know, position to say, okay, I feel that is an accurate reading of what this dog will develop later on in life. That's my personal opinion, but that's also the opinion of the OFA.
I think that's really beneficial specifically to hips, but again, in my personal experience and opinion, it can apply to a lot of clinical schemes that in some cases looking at the dog more than once in terms of like eye disease at different stages in life, and especially in heart assessments as well, having a younger, midlife, and older is generally felt to be much more informative about the status of that dog.
And the type
So
of assessment. So like for
yeah,
for heart disease, there's certain diseases where an echocardiogram is not necessarily going to tell you everything you need to know about that breed. For some of the cardiomyopathies, they start with arrhythmias. So with Boxer arrhythmia, with Doberman-Pinscher cardiomyopathy, it's the Holter monitor that keys you in early on. Because the onset of some of these diseases is after breeding age in many cases. So you need to know what type of assessment is going to give you the most information for a dog at a breeding age. And if there are no assessments that can identify it at a breeding age, then you use what are called multi-generational assessments. So for instance, the Cavalier King Charles Spaniels with their earlier onset mitral valvular disease. They'll use a generational scheme where you use a dog for breeding that has a normal echo, whose both parents also have a normal echo at the time of that mating. So you are looking one generation back at an older population that can be expressing that mitral valve disease than the younger dogs that are being used for breeding. So each different disease can have different guidelines that really helps us and gives us the power to actually select against those diseases and make big differences on the health of these breeds.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bell. I feel like that's a great way to end, even though I know that there are a number of questions we weren't able to get to in person, but I feel like that encompasses a lot of what was talked about today, which is ultimately really being informed about your dogs and keeping great records and looking at multiple generations and thinking about the big picture in health and breeding. So I wish that all 300 plus of us that are still here could give you a round of applause, but thank you again, Dr. Bell, for joining us. We really appreciate you taking the time to do this. And again, we will be providing a recording of this within the next few days, along with some answers to those Q&As that we weren't able to get to in this session. At the end, when we close down the webinar, there will be a short survey that will pop up that'll help inform us about how we may want to run another seminar, what you'd like to learn more about, or what you'd like to see in the future. So thank you again for joining us, and thank you again for all of your support and being here today. So I wish you well on the rest of your day, morning, evening, wherever you are in the world. So thank you very much.
Thank you to everyone.